How to do it.
Thank you, Dane. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very excited to be here to kick off the second full day of the Ocean Exchange. From a sponsor's perspective, yesterday was just terrific. As the day unfolded and I mingled about the room, I couldn't help but be swept up and motivated by the energy and the enthusiasm of the different discussions. And that energy and the enthusiasm is the reason why WWL participates and takes a leadership role in the Ocean Exchange. So thank you for that. So my objectives over the next couple of minutes are three. First, I will give you a snapshot of WWL. Secondly, I'll introduce to you some challenges that we see on the regulatory front, which is quite a different approach than I took last year for those of you who are here, where I outlined some of the initiatives that WWL is working on to lessen its environmental footprint. And then lastly, I'll introduce you to a key customer partner of ours, Mr. Greg Jansen from Caterpillar, who will come up and talk about why sustainability is important for Caterpillar. And as you listen to Greg, you'll understand that sustainability and Caterpillar is progressing world progress in a way that other large manufacturers don't quite do that. Okay? So before I delve into that agenda, I'll take the first slide. Oh, back one. A year ago, I talked about an initiative where we had a vision of an eco-friendly marine terminal. And right about this time last year, we were putting a bid in for that terminal. And I'm happy to say that we've been awarded that terminal by the government of Australia. So we are in the process of developing, and in the future we will manage a terminal that generates its own power and energy, completely recycles all of its waste, and to the extent possible under the technology today, mitigates its emissions from its business activities there. We had this vision to be complete by 2030, and with this award, WWL will now realize its vision more than 10 years ahead of time. So very happy to report that, and we'll give you further updates on that in the years to come. Okay, who is WWL? Well, yesterday we heard about Mr. Rolls and Mr. Royce. Ours is a story about Mr. Wallenius and Mr. Wilhelmsen. So Wallenius was founded in 1934. Wilhelmsen was founded in 1861, and they are both Scandinavian shipping companies. Wallenius is based in Stockholm, Sweden. Wilhelmsen is based in Oslo, Norway. In 1999, recognizing the globalization of businesses, they combined their operating companies to form Wallenius Wilhelmsen Logistics. And today we are part of a group that moves automobiles, heavy equipment, and project cargoes around the planet, and that market share that we have as a group is about 30% worldwide. So that makes us the largest logistics and transportation company that most of you have never heard of. Okay? Okay, so what do we do exactly? We'll take outbound logistics cargo coming out of the factory, whether it's an automobile, whether it's a Caterpillar tractor, or whether it's a project from Siemens or General Electric or Boeing. We will move that from the factory through an assortment of conveyances in the supply chain, whether that be truck, rail, barge. We will take it on the deep sea, we will do that in reverse, and we will get it to its ultimate destination. We manage supply chain activity across the board from factory to dealer for some customers, and we only do segments of it for other customers. It's really an a la carte menu. So our group, we have 60 vessels that trade in 12 routes around the world, covering 6 continents, all but Antarctica. Interestingly, we move 4.3 million annual movements through that network, but more on land than we do on ocean. Our land-based business is approaching about $1 billion a year, and we're really starting to see that the activity that we provide in terms of value in the logistics chain for our customers is becoming more and more important with each passing year. Case in point, technical services that we do for automobiles and vehicles. We move 6 million vehicles worldwide through our processing center. So when a vehicle comes out of a factory and it gets to a destination market and there are idiosyncrasies in that destination market that need to be catered to, we can manage that at a quality level and at a specification level for the OEM in a way that others can't do that. 4 million of those vehicles alone go through the North American network that we have in Canada, the US, and Mexico. Then in addition to that, we started to invest about 15 years ago in marine terminals. If you consider what a marine terminal is, it's a bottleneck between our ocean activity and our land-based activity. So what had happened in the mid-90s as the world's economy really started to heat up in a big way, we had strategic locations, terminals that we depended on that came to us and said, we love you, but we love the container carriers more. Because for that footprint of land that we have currently a BMW or a Caterpillar tractor sitting on, we can go to a container carrier and charge him or her that same cost 6 times stacking that unit. Can't stack a BMW, and you certainly can't stack a Caterpillar unit. So we recognized that we needed to make some strategic investments in key areas of the world to control our own destiny and become more efficient in the handoff between the ocean and the land-based activity. Hence our terminal investments, and that's what the terminal in Melbourne, Australia represents, and that will be number 13. 4 million units go through that terminal operation each year. All right, so lastly on who WWL is, this is a snapshot of 35 of our customers. By no stretch a complete list, but there are some pretty good names up there that you'll recognize. Okay, so how is our business looking forward? We think it's pretty good. The fundamental drivers are very, very positive. There's continued global growth. That's growth in nations. That's growth in populations. That's growth in economies, which points to the middle column. We heard the young lady from Rolls-Royce yesterday talk about 2 billion people in the middle class today. In the next 15 years, by 2030, 3 billion more will enter. So 15 years from now, the middle class will be 5 billion people. That's more cars sold, that's more equipment needed for infrastructure and development for the energy needs of a growing population. Now, that's good for our business, but in terms of the ocean exchange, everything I just said has a flip side to it. And if you take a look at this slide now, that leaves a pretty big global footprint. So 50-something years ago, not that long ago, when I was born, there were 3 billion people on the planet. Today there are 7, and by the time we get to 2050, just 90 years later, there will be nearly 10 billion people on the planet. That's going to create an enormity of challenges for all of us to deal with. Now, I can sit here and explain to you all of the dimensions of the challenges that we face relative to everything I just highlighted on this slide, but we don't have time for that. So I'll focus on one thing, and that's emissions. And specifically, I'd like to talk about sulfur emissions. Now, sulfur emissions cause respiratory challenges, they cause cardiac issues, and they're the leading cause of acid rain. And the sulfur emissions that come into the air right now, 72% of that come from the coal factories. Another 20% come from other industrial processes. And the remaining 7% come from the making of steel, the smelting of metals, transportation-related issues, trains, trucks, vessels like WWLs, and off-road equipment. So this is a big, big issue. The ECAs, environmental control areas that we heard about yesterday from the young lady from Rolls-Royce. If you're operating in an ECA within 200 miles of either coast of North America or throughout Northern Europe, your vessels cannot burn fuel that have a sulfur content of more than 1%. In about 85 days from now, on January 1st, that number goes down to 1/10 of 1%. Compare that to the global limits, where you can burn up to 3.5% sulfur content in your fuel. Just 3 short years ago, that number was 4.5%, so it's coming down. In 5 years from now, that number will come down to 0.5%. So there's dramatic change coming on the regulatory front for sulfur emissions. And WWL welcomes that. We embrace that. We think this is a good thing. This regulation is needed for all the reasons that I've spelled out thus far. So how are we approaching this? There's really 4 things that we're looking at. First, starting at your 9 o'clock on the orange box, we're burning low sulfur fuel where we can. In areas where we enter the ecozone, we will burn diesel fuel, the top green, which has a very low sulfur content. There's a premium in doing that, but that's something that we do, and we do it willingly. I talked about the global average on the last slide being 3.5%. For more than 15 years now, WWL has self-imposed a maximum limit of 1.5% in the sulfur it burns worldwide. So we've been making a multi-million-dollar investment in a year just as part of our own values and environmental commitment. We also look at some other energy sources that are out there. Some are ready for prime time, most are not. One is liquid natural gas, and there are some vessels under construction today that will burn LNG. And then there are other opportunities to clean the emissions, and that is the scrubber that I talked about last year, exhaust gas cleaning systems. In essence, what it does is it takes the exhaust from our vessels, passes it through a liquid solution that takes out the sulfur and the NOx. The challenge with that is it's pretty expensive, and to retrofit a group fleet of more than 160 vessels is a very, very time-consuming and expensive proposition. So there isn't one solution, as the bullet on the right says. We'll need multiple solutions as we move forward, and we're going to count on technology and ideas that come from venues like this to do what we need to accomplish moving forward. So when our customers ask us, what's the plan? The emission regulations are changing. We have a multi-plan. Now, inside the ecozones, we change away from the bunker heavy fuel oil, and we'll start to burn marine diesel oil. Medium term, we can install more scrubbers. We've got new buildings coming up, new buildings meaning developing vessels in the yards today. We're building vessels with the scrubbers in there, but that's not the only solution. And then going forward, we're going to have to look at new approaches. For instance, liquid natural gas. Then, ultimately, we will move towards our vision of a zero emissions vessel. And this is the Oracel vessel, which is named after the award that we'll give out tonight. The Oracel vessel is a zero emissions vessel that is powered entirely by the wind, by the sun, and by wave dynamics. So this is the ultimate of where we want to be in terms of our vessel profile. So all of these things that I talked about on the last slide and this vision out there on the horizon is what motivates WWL to achieve its zero emissions goal. Okay, so I talked about the regulatory front. The regulatory front is not the challenge. Cost and enforcement of the regulations is really the challenge. So if you start with the costs, if we burn marine diesel in the ecozones, that's about 50% more costly than the heavy fuel oil that we burn around the rest of the world. So there's a price premium there. But you know what? That's just the price of doing business. So we're okay with that. If you look at the consumption per day and then the added cost per day, depending on the vessel, the efficiency of that vessel, we can be anywhere between $15,000 and $20,000 a day, times WWL's 60 ships, times the 160 ships in the group fleet. It starts to become an expensive proposition where we will be spending tens of millions of dollars a year on the changes. But again, for the fourth or fifth time in this presentation, that's something that we do willingly and we embrace it. The challenge for us is the enforcement. There is not sufficient enforcement out there right now. The European Commission analysis in the ecozone says only 1 in 1,000 vessels are inspected. And those that are caught burning fuel above the sulfur minimum, they've been fined anywhere between 300 euros and 85,000 euros. So if you think about it, I said this will cost me, just as an operator, tens of millions of dollars a year. If the fines out there are 300 euros to 85,000 euros, there's something lopsided about that equation. So the weak enforcement in Europe is an issue. The enforcement is better in North America, but it's not sufficient. But worldwide, when we get to 2020 and we drop that global average from 3.5% to 0.5%, we're going to have a dramatic enforcement challenge. Funding, technology, jurisdictional issues, there are lots of challenges inside of that enforcement that I won't get into right now. But looking at this chart, as the regulatory course increase, and I hate to read the bullet, enforcement more than regulation becomes the driver of compliance. So if that red line going across is the limit of enforcement that we face and the cost is up there, where that red question mark is, it really forces some companies to ponder decisions that they shouldn't have to even think about. If enforcement is weak and compliance costs are high, that temptation is out there. And if you're only going to be fined a couple of €100 and the cost of compliance is several million per year, we have a challenge. All right, so what we're looking for is a level playing field. But right now, unless enforcement increases, we have an uneven playing field, as the picture indicates here. So, in essence, bad behavior is rewarded, and responsible behavior is it says distorted, but accepted. And we can't have that. So, negative environmental consequences for all. So, this isn't going to fix itself. And as I said a moment ago, it's really only going to get stronger as we approach 2020. So, we've all heard the old adage that you can't fight City Hall alone. In all due respect, if anyone from the mayor's office is still here. But we see that there are strength in numbers. So based on discussions that we had in this forum last year and input from partners like Bill Shira at Gulfstream and our own Jane Cohen, who flew in from Texas, our man Roger Strevens came up with a concept that we call the Trident Alliance. And it's really a strength in numbers concept, where it's a single shipping network where we take like-minded operators and we bring them together and we bring a concerted effort towards government, towards industry, and towards regional activity, whatever the bodies may be. And it's really proven to be quite successful. It's a strong message on the environment, and there are now 17 leading companies involved with this, and very quickly approaching nearly 10% of the fuel burned worldwide. So we're starting to get some critical mass with this Trident Alliance. And the beautiful thing about this slide is it's about 3 weeks old. And as of yesterday, there are now more than 20 major carriers involved in this. And the level of fuel burned in our segment of the industry is now well beyond the 10% number that's reflected here. So it's really quite a good thing. Now there's a breakout group this afternoon at 3:30, which some of you have been invited to. And for others who think they may be able to make a contribution to the discussion around how do we make the Trident Alliance stronger and more powerful, or take a different approach, I would encourage you to reach out to our own Roger Strevens before the lunchtime, or at the lunchtime hour, to see if we can work into that. Okay? So, as I wind down and get ready to introduce Greg, I will say that back to the growth in populations, nations, the footprint of all of our industries that I spoke of earlier in the presentation, we've got a wide assortment of challenges. And it's really going to take all hands on deck to make improvement a reality. So we're going to count on you, your input, and your good ideas. And one of the values that WWL has is teaming and collaboration. That's something that we encourage strongly and drive within our own culture. It's something that we encourage and drive within the customer partnerships that we have with those companies that I showed on the earlier slide, and it's something that I would encourage and drive here in this room. We need you to help us achieve our ultimate goals, and the benefit will help everyone. So when I was a young man, my father said to me, "Ray, you're going to meet lots of people in life that talk the talk. That's not enough. You want to be someone who walks the talk, and you want to associate with people like that." That association of people walking the talk is why WWL actively involves itself in the Ocean Exchange, and I thank you for your commitment to that effort. Thank you very much.